special edition of Creativity and Robots featuring a great group of guests. Today we'll be discussing Oprah Winfrey's AI special, and to that note, here I got Jagger Waters, an AI filmmaker and producer, and I'll go through her description. She's an award-winning AI filmmaker and producer, currently working with Curious Refuge and Scape.ai, and recently her work has been highlighted actually by the Producers Guild of America and the TV Academy. Next, we got Kate Cook Techman, and she's the founder of Era 7 Partners, a marketing consultancy helping brands, agencies, and enterprise teams build AI strategies and evolve their businesses through digital innovation. And last but not least, we got Kyle-Prescott Ogunbase, who's a product manager at New Zealand, a growth stage edtech company dedicated to improving literacy by adapting current news stories for a variety of reading levels to support students worldwide. My name is Juan Faisal. I'm the host here at Creativity Robots. I'm an AI educator at Super Intelligent, and also I help brand agencies build a community, educate their audience, and help them take action. So, how are you all doing? Thank you for joining.
Great.
Fantastic.
All right, folks. So let's get to it. We got 30 minutes and a lot to unpack. So first of all, I want to get a temperature check here. And Jagger, what's your biggest thought after watching this special?
Sure. After watching the special, I think my biggest thought from a programming standpoint for this special was how they started it with the average person's concerns, and these cutaways to, average Americans talking about their experiences with AI, good and bad. We had a woman who was a victim of a very awful phone scam that was powered by AI. So it was good to see those real perspectives from average Americans. And I think that moment specifically, with that woman, that mother and daughter who were victims of a phone scam where her daughter's voice was cloned with AI, that should motivate all of us to have conversations with our family about safe words, about how to avoid scams like that personally. So, yeah.
It's crazy you're bringing that up, Jagger, because literally that's one of the things that resonated the most to me and felt like the most relatable to everyday people, right? Something that will be, especially for me from where I come from, we've had those virtual kidnapping since forever, so it's kind of like we're used to it, but especially here where maybe you're seeing these things for the first time many times, it's great to start having these conversations. Now, Kate, I want to hear from you. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, definitely agree. For me, just sort of pulling back, it really was the medium is the message. The fact that this special even exists to me means that we have reached full-on mainstream awareness about AI, something that before ChatGPT came out in 2022 was, in certain corners of industry, certain corners of Silicon Valley, Silicon Beach, now is, full front page news for the average person. So, I think it's very clear that something fundamental is happening starting now in our society. And I thought it was really interesting how Marilynne Robinson at the end pointed out that the youth, the kids who are being born today or maybe already born are going to grow up in a world where they don't understand this not having been there. Almost like generation AI, right? Is happening now. And so I really do think it's marking a period of time in our evolution as a society that really struck me.
Mm-hmm. And on that note, there are two things that I'd like to discuss with you. One, we'll get into it in a second because it's related to Sam Altman. But one of the things that you say that resonates with me is when Aza Raskin, and hopefully I'm getting the name right, and Tristan Harris were talking with Oprah, some of these topics were brought up and there was a problem with social media. So I'm very interested in the thoughts you all have about that. But before we get there, Kyle, give me your thoughts.
Yeah. I really appreciated the balance between the future, forward-looking possibilities that AI offers the world, as well as the risks that are inherent with this new technology. In particular, I really appreciated watching Marques Brownlee show Oprah Sora AI, OpenAI's text-to-video model, because it reminded me of me doing the exact same thing with my mother a few months back, right? The fact that she saw this video that was generated, we may know this, being professionals and in this industry, but she looked at it and she wasn't able to distinguish between reality and something that was totally false, like the child eating a ice cream cone on the beach, right? I think also what Kate said really resonated with me as well. This new generation of children are going to be raised in an environment where this is ubiquitous. It is a part of reality. And it becomes much harder to distinguish between reality and something that's totally generated. There are beautiful possibilities there, as I mentioned before, but also inherent risks that I know we'll discuss today.
And Kyle, I'm gonna focus on the Bill Gates aspect with you. As I was watching last night, I was like taking notes. I'm going, oh, Kyle's gonna do some talking today. And Jagger also want to discuss with you about Marques Brownlee for the very same reason. As I was watching, I was thinking, who's the best person for this? I know you're all very smart people, very talented, so we'll cover everything together. But also was trying to give you all a little spotlight here. So let's talk about the first guest of the night, the most dangerous man in the world, according to Oprah, Sam Altman. And Kate, one of the things, before we get there, one of the things he said, and I think it's the most important to understand, is when he started explaining, as Jagger said, we are all in a bubble in which we talk, breathe, live AI. We're aware of every tool coming up. So it's easy to lose perspective of how the real folks, are experiencing this technology or what's their understanding. Because while we know that AI is not an alive thing in a computer, that's not what everyday people think, because what they're hearing is that the robots, are going to take over everything and they're smarter than you. So when Sam Altman was explaining AI as this thing that gets trained and then it can reason, Kate, how do you feel about that definition of AI? Explaining for people, again, that are not technical, that don't care, but want to understand.
Well, I think Sam Altman was supporting his product launch that came out on the same day, which is GPT-01, I believe is how it's pronounced. Which is the next step in OpenAI's committed pathway towards artificial general intelligence. So basically what AGI, artificial general intelligence, means is it means that the bots can do basically anything and everything that a human being can do just as well as the best human being that could do that. There's many definitions, that's the one I used. And just the same day as the special rolled out, I think they have a very wise PR team over there at OpenAI. They had released their new model out into the world that is supposed to have better reasoning capabilities than the previous models. So what does that mean? It means that, your average experience, if you've ever talked to ChatGPT, put in a prompt, get a written response. Put in a prompt, get a written response. If you start testing it and red teaming it, like I'm sure all of us have done, you'll find that there's some things that it's really not good at. Oddly enough, math, it's really bad at math because math is problem solving. And that takes higher order reasoning ability. Another great example that they put out there is writing a long sentence and asking how many words are in it or how many letter R's are in it. And it can't tell you because it's just not simply the way that it's built. But now they're evolving those reasoning capabilities and building it into the next generation of models. And that's really big because it means that the actual ability to understand the world is increasing. And I think, without getting too far into it, once these reasoning abilities are baked into the models, which I feel confident they will be over time, it's just a matter of when. The next step after that is bots actually taking actions on your behalf, which is a whole other world that we're not quite prepared for in any way, that wasn't even really discussed in the special. But yeah, I thought it was really interesting that was his definition on the day of the dawn of 01.
Smart guy, that one. Jagger, you're a storyteller. You literally make a living connecting with folks, helping them feel reflected on the stories you create, right? So when you hear Sam Altman talking, about this misuse of the technology, but also this beautiful upside that is waiting for us once we cross the Rubicon, like, how do you feel about that? Your first impressions as you were hearing him?
Sure. Well, as far as AI for filmmaking or, narrative fiction storytelling, I'm a bit biased knowing that it's great for that. But it is bad for, disinformation or misinformation. So when I heard Altman talk about those, like someone will misuse it, I do agree. I know that that's coming. I mean, if we see the atrocities that have been committed with cars, with cameras, with simple basic technology that were not created with anything nefarious in mind, someone misuses that technology. So I think that he was wise to point that out and be so direct and say, hey, something, bad can happen here, and it probably will. And we saw that with that mother-daughter example. But, some of Sam Altman's examples felt a bit out of touch. He had this comparison talking aspirationally about AI, using AI to build a house or using it as your architect. And it's like, well, most Americans can't afford a home, and AI is not going to make that cheaper. So his examples weren't really grounded in reality.
Mm-hmm. Just to interject, being married to an architect, we were not a big fan of that one either.
Personally, I would not get into a house that was built using ChatGPT. Call me paranoid. Kyle, I want to touch base with you because you're involved in, product management. You think about the future of work, and probably you're talking to lots of folks about that. So, did it come genuine? Like his tone when he was explaining, did it resonate with you? What were your thoughts?
I think it was very optimistic. I think that, of course, we all know that Sam has been embroiled in a few, I'll say scandals, but really just like controversies being at OpenAI. And AI is scary, right? Like a lot of the narrative that we hear in the media is it's going to take your job. Even in this special alone, a lot of examples were given of how it can be used for nefarious aims, like FBI Director Christopher Wray, who talked about how it empowers criminals, right? Like, and we also heard the example that was alluded to earlier with the scam that was conducted on that family that had no idea that AI was really even a thing. So of course he had to sell it, right? Like it's his company. I think they're raising 150 billion just to continue moving. So I understand the purpose behind that, but I'm also an optimist when it comes to AI. Granted, I do recognize it's going to be used in terrible, awful ways by people who have those intents, but it's also fascinating to think about how it intersects with other technologies as well. Like Jagger used cars as an example, right? Like integrating AI into simple technology like cars. I'm interested to see how that improves self-driving tech, or I'm interested to see how, AI might improve individual education, right? Or differentiated education. So when I hear Sam Altman talk about his vision of the world and vision of the future, even though he's given this example of, maybe AI is going to be able to build a house for you, even though I wouldn't want to get in that house, I might be interested to see what it spits out.
I'll look from the outside. You let me know how it goes. One question that I have for all of you, there was a question that Oprah asked, and to me, it felt like there wasn't a straight answer for that, and this answer has actually changed from previous time this question was asked, which is, Sam, should we trust you? So should we trust Sam Altman, who's talking to politicians every other day with this? How do we feel? Do we have any thoughts?
No. Jagger, go. I'll go after you.
You take it. I'll piggyback.
I mean, no, inherently we should not trust any single person with this powerful technology. What's interesting to me is when you zoom out you sort of see that each tech company sort of have these major tech companies, right, sort of have their role in this evolution. And Sam Altman, in and of himself, and if you've read anything about him, it's very much his way of conducting business, is definitely kind of at the leading edge of pushing the envelope, pushing innovation, driving everyone to move faster, and sort of putting some of the regulatory safeguards that some of his peers at OpenAI who left and founded Anthropic did not agree with putting to the side in order to reach that level of innovation. And so, no, this is a capitalist movement. And people are out for fundraising and they're out to win. And I think also Chris Wray talked about this is kind of a space race against China and Russia and other actors in a geopolitical context. So while moving ahead is not something that you can stymie, at the same time, we can't put all of our trust in a godlike figure to get us there. And I think it's really important that both government and Sam's peers in the C-suite across all the powerful tech companies, especially with his partnership with Microsoft, sort of hold him accountable to a certain agreement on how we should do it. Now, what that is, I don't know.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking too. And just to speak to the capitalism element, as a young American, I think what I've observed, not what I want, but what I observe is that I recognize explicitly that safety is not the priority or primary concern of the private sector or the government. And I've been shown that progress and profit always come first. That's just what I've observed. It's not the world I want to live in, but it seems realistic. And I aim to change that, but it colors my perspective on AI. So I think if we want companies in any industry to do the right thing, specific to this conversation, but any industry, we need to incentivize it for that business, because otherwise I think they will find a way to skirt around it. So if we want accountability, if we want Sam Altman to be open and honest, we need to not just ask for that, we need to actually incentivize it for his business. And I hope that we do.
I agree with your takeaway. Like, if they don't have an incentive, if money talks for all of us. Mm-hmm. So, we live in a capitalistic society, gotta pay rent, gotta pay food. So, but like Jaggers, I don't think if there's an incentive to do the right thing, they will, because also the way the whole system is set up, profit needs to happen, or you get someone that can bring the profit. So again, I think regulation will be important. Now, we do need to move on. The genie's out of the bottle, like Oprah said. And I wanna get a bit more artsy, and we're gonna go about one guy that I actually personally like a lot. I still don't know how to pronounce his name, but Marques Brownlee, I think it is. And, he was actually probably for a lot of people for the first time showing Zora, showing 11 Labs, and what can be done with those tools. For those of you watching, I don't want to assume so Zora for visuals, 11 Labs for audio. So Jagger, as a renowned AI filmmaker and producer, you are the person I want to talk to about this. So what were your thoughts of how he explained the technology? Gut check. Like, how do you feel about this?
Yeah, I think Marcus did a great job, showing these examples of generative AI for video, for voiceover. But I was also very aware that it's likely they recorded this special about a month ago, because in the last 2 weeks, there have been some pretty rapid advancements for the realistic quality of AI video. And I don't think the examples they used were actually the best. They were the best a month ago, but that's how quickly this is moving. So 2 just AI film news pieces that I really want to mention for anyone watching is a platform called Minimax recently came out, and that is a Chinese startup. It would be considered a competitor to Sora. It's accessible right now. And the human expressions are very uncanny. It can do very complex sadness, those more complex human emotions And I've seen a few examples that have really blown my mind. And we also got Luma Labs 1.6, Dream Machine 1.6, now has camera control. And this is a huge advancement for AI for entertainment or filmmaking, because for the last year and a half, nobody's been able to control where the camera's going. So you can't really direct. You can't create a narrative, cohesive story without that kind of creative control. And we have it, especially with these features like we have start frame, end frame, and camera control. So those really are the building blocks for filmmaking, and this is a huge shift in the last 2 weeks. So yeah, those are my thoughts on what Marques shared. They didn't really speak too much about deepfakes. I thought that was an opportunity maybe missed in Marques's segment. And my concern about deepfakes are obviously, having an indistinguishable video that looks like someone you know or a famous figure or a politician. That does threaten our perspective, our reality. And I'm torn, because I do understand that restricting the average person's ability to manipulate video footage beyond reality could and will have a negative impact. But I also really resist the idea that we should restrict that or have only authorized users be able to do that. So yeah, I hope that we can move forward by restricting what we need to, but not holding too much back, because then we get into, well, who's allowed to use it, under what circumstances, and then who's making the decisions of who's allowed to use it. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Marques's section.
Thank you. One thing that caught my attention, and I'll send this question to the group, so let me know who wants to answer. It's that at no point, there was a sample he gave that the minute he said it, I went like, I don't know if that's right. When he was talking about training, I think it was Sora, with footage from kids, or he was talking as children being what was used to train like a, and one of the things that I couldn't help but reflect on is, this model from Stable Diffusion that had a lot of seasoned material, and one of the, like we said, deepfakes are a huge concern, but also I think, materials that are featuring minors, it's also a huge thing that we know has very real consequences, not only because of those images, but also because of all the issues it brings tracking the real cases, right? So were you surprised about this lack of talking about the training? Did it make sense in the context that maybe the audience is just learning about AI for the first time? How do we feel about this?
Yeah, I had a few thoughts about it. We've heard of a few stories happening in schools to this day of students creating deepfakes of their classmates, circulating material that ruins people's reputations, specifically minors, right? It's terrifying, and it's happening right now. And there is a clear disconnect. It was actually really fascinating hearing Marques talk about it with this expression of wonder. And I understand his excitement about the technology, but it was very clear that he wasn't thinking about the potential for harm with training that model on real children, and what that potentially means for the future of our society, for children, for their safety, for their protection. And the question becomes, how do we stop this? How do we regulate that? How do we prevent that from happening? Not just in our nation, but worldwide. As we said, the genie's out of the bottle, the cat's out of the bag. Even if we put up safeguards in the United States, what happens when international criminals decide to do it in other markets and circulate this material in encrypted chat services, kind of like Telegram, right? Like, that's very possible, and theoretically might even be happening.
Mm-hmm. Kate,
Yeah,
as an AI
I
strategist.
think, well, can I add on that? Because, for me, at least a piece of this is a very important conversation, and at least a piece of this conversation is kind of my reason for being, right? My reason for having this career, which is we are, as those of us who are in this bubble every day, sort of this bridge to our world, whether that's the education world, whether that's the creator world, Jagger, whether that's the business world. For me, we have to build a bridge and raise awareness. Whether that's sitting down and talking to that vulnerable person in your life, a grandparent, parent, a relative, a friend who is more susceptible, to being tricked by the technology and teaching them. And I think, at least in our small way, the more people like us that there are who are reading and thinking and exploring and understanding and can sort of talk about that with their community, the better off we'll be. Though it's not to say that that alone will prevent international trafficking of horrible things. But, it does sort of help us in our small way to prevent against the deepfake that we saw in the special last night with the mother and daughter. So yeah, it's really important to just keep the dialogue open.
There's a common line that I'm hearing from all of you, which seems to be like, right now, if I had to pick one takeaway from these 25 minutes, and hopefully you guys have a little bit more time because we still have a lot to cover and we got people joining the stream. So thank you all for those joining. I appreciate you watching live and then everybody else that watch later. But it seems like education is the best thing we can do, like educating the people we know, even if we're making like a small contribution, that will go a long way on helping other folks become acquainted with the technology. The upside that we hear on media all the time, but also this downside that we know will happen and we'll have to like get used to it. That's like we used to say in 2020, our new normal. So am I reading you all correctly with this education being like the one takeaway right now?
Yeah.
Yes. And I think what's interesting is because of the way that LLMs operate, it removes the need for a specialist to code software, to code solutions. It democratizes software for people. And that, I think, is what's brilliant about it, because at the end of the day, really all you need is kind of a point in the right direction and you can build anything yourself. And that democratization, I mean, there are so many incredible software solutions that exist out there to solve business problems, to help with creative. But at the same time, we maintain this sort of creatorship function because we can speak with these machines using natural language. And to me, that's what's so revolutionary about it. And I think a little bit of what Sam was trying to get at, maybe clumsily, but trying to get at in terms of, access and broadening access. I think the other thing to think about in terms of access is that the more access that is given to, the data sets that were created to power these foundational LLMs like ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude, they're inherently flawed and biased. The more access that is given, especially in a multimodal capacity, right? Technology that sees, speaks, hears the world around them, the broader its base of data can be, and the more inclusive and representative it can be. And so I do think that they have an inherent interest in increasing access to everybody so that their models can actually be better. Because if you've ever trapped it into being, really corny about something, you realize the limitations of its data set, that it's missing sort of huge swaths of population demographic psychographics that it can't really represent because it hasn't been given the data to understand it.
Yeah. I also think that education is what I'm trying to advocate for. And in my peer groups, especially in entertainment where people are resisting this a lot, I try to say, like, I understand, and you don't have to use it, but I think you should understand how it works, and keeping yourself educated, understanding the rapid advancements, and spending, even if it's just 10 minutes a week, kind of being like, all right, what happened, and like, what are the tools capable of now? It's good to keep that close to you, because I think this is the human decision. The human decision is recognizing we know that legislature does not work at the pace of rapidly developing technology. So it's up to us to choose to stay educated about this. And that's going to be a big hurdle because it requires self-motivation. It's not something that's going to be handed to us.
Jagger. Oh, sorry, Kyle, go ahead.
No. Go ahead, please.
All right, I'll get back to you because I want to hear you talk. I have a couple of questions for you later. But Jagger, now that you're bringing this up, give me the perfect segue to go into the segment with Aza Raskin and Tristan Harris, right, where they were covering addiction, doom scrolling, polarization, and something that really resonated with me that was his parallel with social media, right? Because many of the things, social media, when it started, we had like 10 years where the internet was a magical place. Everything was fun. And then Facebook came along, and then 2016, but we had kind of like this honeymoon stage, right? That in a way, I do feel we're seeing. So there's an interesting parallel between social media and the consequences and what's happening right now with AI, right? And one of the phrases, Jagger, that resonated with me was like, we don't get the time to figure it out this time because this technology is flying. It's not social media with Facebook going down for a full day, and like kind of slow. It's a whole different ballgame. So how do you feel about this?
Well, I think to go back to the car example, it's, we made cars before we figured out we needed seatbelts. And, but eventually we did. We realized we need seatbelts. We created a mandate for them. We made we made it a legal requirement. And it's probably fair to say that this will progress in the same way. We're not going to know what we need to protect against until something has already happened. But to act swiftly when it does, I think in that section, they really acknowledge that, good intentions as a developer are not a guardrail for what something can become. Yeah. It kind of reminds me too that in the Bill Gates section, which I know we're probably getting too soon. Bill talked about how we've organized our society. We've attached our self-worth to our ability to work, and he spoke about dignity. So to sort of push it in that direction, that's really what comes to mind.
Mm-hmm. Kyle, how about you?
In all honesty, I do agree, right? I think that we don't necessarily see the consequences, or maybe we're predicting them and we don't necessarily know how they're going to play out. And we might have to react in real time. Truthfully, I think that this is akin to electricity, or this is akin to the Industrial Revolution. AI represents a paramount shift in basically every other industry, and we're only going to see it increase. Like, how is it going to impact the development of different cures or drugs or things like gene editing? How is it going to impact the development of weapons? Like, all of these massive societal implications are arising from the development of AI, and it's only getting faster, and we're going to need to be able to put some significant guardrails behind it, but I just don't know what is actually feasible if everyone in the world is not on the same page.
That's a great question, Kyle. Let's hope for the best. And I want to continue with you, Kyle, and then I'll go with you, Kate. But when the FBI guy came in, Christopher Wray, right? Is that the right way to pronounce Wray?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Otherwise, I'm an immigrant. I don't know. This is not my language. But anyway, we're running through scams. One of the things that it seems like it resonated the most with all of us is, these like virtual kidnappings, right? But one thing that caught my attention, and I was like, dude, I think we're there, right? Is when he talks about, how like the middle of the road criminals are becoming a lot better with AI, but the problem is going to be when the lead criminals use AI, right, in the future. And he referred to this in the future. My thoughts on it as a content creator who started creating videos on YouTube, so no security expert by any, way of saying it, I think this is already happening, right? We talk about election interference. We see Elon Musk on whatever that social network is called, posting horrible stuff. Call me biased because I used to work for Twitter, but I do think he's a horrible person creating, something that it's very destabilizing to society, democracy, women's rights, etc. Right? So what are your thoughts on this elite criminals' possibility of accessing AI? Do you think it's happening or not?
It's already happening on a small scale. There was recently that story about a individual who created music, I think using one of the AI music generation tools, and then set up a bunch of bots to listen to them. Made, I think, $10 million as a result of that. But that's illegal. It's fraud. And we're only going to see it increase, right? I can only imagine how AI is going to be leveraged in the financial sector, right? Right now, algorithms are already used to help massive hedge funds and financial institutions, trade and make pennies or fractions of a penny to create billions of dollars at the end of the year. What happens when that is in the hands of individuals and they can use it to manipulate different stocks, use it to manipulate different industries and businesses? And then, when 3D printing technology became ubiquitous and more available, people were uploading on dark websites or, torrent sites, the ability to 3D print guns. Like there was a recipe to print a Glock in your own home as long as you had the right material. And someone who's shrewd enough to use AI for nefarious aims is going to be able to do that. Criminals are often the most sophisticated, intelligent people in our society because they dedicate and devote their lives to figuring out how to scam people or get one over on them. And that's going to take some very intentional safeguards around AI, as well as some really brilliant people in government intervention to prevent that from happening.
I just wanted to bounce off that the Spotify crime, the guy who like conned Spotify and like got bots to sort of like give the streams and then make money. Undoubtedly illegal. It's great that that was criminally prosecuted, but I think that that's an action, that's a crime where we look at like, well, this is someone who was revealing this system for what it is. Spotify is a platform that's not good for artists, that doesn't pay enough. And his criminal action kind of calls the bluff on Spotify. It says, this is what it would take to really be successful with this platform that you've created. So as much as that was a crime, and I'm glad it's getting punished, I think that was revealing.
Kate, you work with a lot of enterprise clients, right? And I'm sure they have thoughts and probably a lot of risks when they're implementing AI in their projects on how this could be misused against them. What's a common concern that you hear?
Common concerns include where is my data and where is my client's data going? Are models going to be trained on my data? And then the flip side of that being, okay, if I create something, who owns it, which our legal system doesn't have any clear answer to as of yet. Is it my property? Is it the property of the company that built the AI model? Is it a shared property between all of the people who input training data into the model? It was trained on Jagger's art and Kyle's art, so they each own a piece of it. It's very muddy right now. And so I think, for a lot of clients who are not comfortable quite yet, they're really using this technology back of house instead of within their product that they're giving to the world. But I think those are some of the big concerns. I think, to spin it to the positive, though, the light bulbs do turn on at a certain point, and that is great. So, I saw Ethan Mollick recently posted that and he's, if you don't follow him, you should follow him. He's one of the leading voices in sort of the AI space. And he said that enterprises where the leadership are using AI tend to move faster and create better things. And I really do believe that because you can have fears, doubts, questions, but the minute that you start experimenting and playing with these tools and you open up Pandora's box and you start to feel powerful in a certain way because you can hold this power in your hands or your keyboard, right? And you can create things, you can have new ideas. It sparks all sorts of creativity and innovation once you start to actually roll up your sleeves and play. And when that light bulb goes on, I feel like it's off to the races. Everyone sort of suddenly feels bought in. And I think there's a lot of benefit that comes with feeling bought in. Putting the fear aside and just sort of experimenting. Also awareness and education so that you can prevent yourself from being scammed, or you can be sure that you're using your data in a safe way. So for me, that's really kind of where the magic comes in. And I'd say the best thing about working with enterprise clients.
And Kate, I want to double click on that just briefly. I know I've said some potentials for harm that AI has sparked in my, I guess, imagination, but the potentials for beautiful, amazing, transformative things happening in our society are very real and apparent. Personalized learning plans, differentiated education. Imagine every kid having their own personalized tutor, which Khan Academy is building right now, right? Like we're seeing it in motion. And truthfully, I think we are on the cusp of maybe a second industrial or informational revolution.
Cal, and given you work on EdTech, we're almost getting to the end. We got two guests that we got to discuss, then we have some final thoughts and everybody can go home. But Cal, you work in EdTech, right? We're all educators here. We all, if I look at your careers, been doing a job in which we're trying to educate other folks on how to incorporate AI, right? But one of the things when we talk about education and this instructor that it's like a 7-Eleven, always on, I cannot help but think about the data gap and about the lack of diversity on training data and about hallucinations. So Kyle, given you're so involved with EdTech, how is the education industry kind of like taking on this challenge?
It's a great question. I think people are of two minds. There's definitely a lot of fear around AI, in education. Is this going to take my job? Are students going to use this to falsify work? But there's also some amazing things that have come out of it, advancing and accelerating the ability for a teacher to create lesson plans or spend more time analyzing or spend more time with students by spending less time analyzing data, right? Like there's so much there. And truthfully, I think what's going to need to happen is that the education system, which is a legacy system, it needs to evolve to work around and work with this new technology rather than trying to shy away from it. Because kids are using it right now. They're using it to learn. They're using it to write their own papers. They're using it to edit their work. And even in our company, we're thinking about intentionally how can we use AI to accelerate the things that teachers want to do on our platform to make it easier for them to get their jobs done. Class sizes are on average 16 around the US, but there are classes that have upwards of 40 students, sometimes upwards of 60 students. And one teacher can't get around to every student to ensure that they're getting the learning that they need. This past year, 40,000 teacher positions sat vacant. And that meant that just fewer and fewer students are having access to good education or someone who actually is paying attention to their growth. But this is something that can equalize it. And I think in this industry, people are very aware and trying to assist with that happening.
Jagger, you do a lot of educational work through your work with Curious Refuge. So I'm interested on your thoughts about how this can influence learning.
Yeah, I think just to jump to Bill Gates' section again, he referred to it to AI as the biggest technical advancement in his lifetime. And this is Bill Gates saying this, right? Think of every tech revolution that he's been a part of in the last 40 years. And he's saying this is the biggest one. So like Kyle was saying, I hope that it can sort of level the playing field with some education. And so many of these conversations end on the note of, but we can't predict the future. And that's true.
If anyone's predicting the future for you, that's a scam artist. That's how I feel.
Yeah. And
personally.
don't ask AI. Don't ask AI to do it either. That's no good.
Kate. Oh, sorry. Jagger, go ahead.
Oh, no. Go ahead, Kate.
Yeah. Kate, what are your thoughts? Especially you have kids that are getting into that age that they're going to start learning, and you're probably going to get to experience firsthand the impact of AI on a child's development. What are your thoughts?
Oh, God. No, I think luckily enough, I have lived through the social media wave. So now I know that I will not allow my children to use social media until they are of a right age. They're 2 and almost 4 now, so I haven't had to have these big conversations yet. But I do believe in, introducing access to these models to my kids. So my 3.5-year-old and I, we talked to ChatGPT and we asked it to translate words into Spanish and French. And it's just a fun game that lasts for a little while, and then we move on to something like a puzzle or a book or a painting, right? But just creating a space for the technology to live in her life, because she will continue to grow up and it will continue to do more and more things in her life as she grows. And I think, from a parenting perspective, it's really important in today's digital age to be cognizant and aware of what technology your children are using and how. And that's super challenging the older that they get. So I am just trying not to stress out about that, Juan. Thank you for asking.
Uh, of course, that's all I care about, making sure everybody's having the best time ever and not worrying about everything. Especially if you look at the titles on the channel, they're all like very, how do you say, how do kids say, very demure, very something that, I don't know. Anyway, old man rambling. So one of the topics, before we move into the last guest, one of the things that, Kyle, you just brought it up, it's the future of work and how AI is going to impact. And Jagger, we'll get to you in a second, because definitely our industry, it's suffering the impact. I don't know about you, but all my friends left LA. I'm like the last man standing here. So, but let's start with you, Cal. Like the future of work, do you see AI, because Bill Gates painted a very rose-colored picture, but how do we feel about the future of work, the impact, for example, in your industry? You mostly deal with tech, but also you focus a lot on the future of work. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So I'll use an analogy first, right? I think when the car was first introduced, right, like the invention, the innovation, it wasn't people who lost jobs, it was horses, right? The horse was put out of a job because people took those. They were drivers, they drove themselves. I do think that AI is going to usher in a new era where we will see some pain in a lot of different industries. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. We see massive layoffs happening in a lot of tech companies right now. But additionally, I think AI is going to be used as a tool to accelerate the things that people do well so that progress can occur faster. And it also will empower an individual to do things that maybe whole teams of people were required to do in previous years. I'm thinking about this 23-year-old, I believe his name is Blake Anderson, who's founded a few companies just using ChatGPT and made out with multi-millions, right? This is some young kid who just decided to go all in on technology and created life-changing opportunities for himself and developed a product that was beneficial to everyone he sold it to. And that helps lift others out of poverty. I really do think that with AI, we're going to be able to help some people really accelerate if they go all in and they really learn this technology. And then if people don't learn it, if people don't try to understand it, if they, shy away from this and fear it, I feel like there's a really good chance that they are the ones who are left behind. And that's not good. That's never good. I think we need to think about those people as well.
Mm-hmm. And as you're sharing these thoughts, we got people in the chat sharing their comments, so I appreciate that. But as you say, I'm glad you brought these points up, because one of the things we tend to hear a lot about AI is how it's gonna democratize everything, right? And Jagger, I want to focus on this one with you. I'll share my thoughts for a second, which is, when I hear democracy, it's kind of like, in a way, like how cultural appropriation works, right? If I hear a tech bro talking to me about how this is going to democratize everything, I'm like, F you, this is like basically you're extracting capital from the working class. And then usually when you say this, everybody thinks you're a communist, and I like, shut up and leave. But Jagger, I'm sure you walk in many rooms full of movie industry people, and they're like, this is AI person. Like, how are you feeling when you walk into rooms in which probably there's going to be some hostility about this new news, just because between, the strikes, what's been happening, everybody's living in LA, there are no jobs. So what have you been feeling hearing?
This could be an hour of its own, so I will keep it brief, though. And yeah, I mean, it's there's a lot of tension in the entertainment industry right now, but To look at it realistically, like since the Industrial Revolution, it's been the goal of business to reduce human labor and automate it with technology. That was always going to come for the film and TV industry, which is a commercial endeavor. And that's so hard because this is a industry where you have very talented, successful, but sensitive artists who are, have a very delicate relationship with their work. But that has already been in conflict with this for-profit business in Hollywood for the last 100 years. That tension has always been there between an artist saying, this is my vision, and, an executive saying, but we need to make money, you need to do it like this. So that tension is just getting exacerbated with AI. And that's why I'm trying to be in the first wave and be like, all right, I'm going to adopt this. I'm going to get on board and see how I can use it to my advantage. And yeah, I mean, the comments of it's going to democratize storytelling, those are big, bold statements. But I do hope that comes true. I hope that it is proven by a kid in a state or a country that, he doesn't have the means to come to LA or work his way up, and, you have to live on minimum wage as an assistant in this industry for 10 years before you have the chance of being on set or working as a TV writer. And that's not sustainable for most people on this planet. So I do want to see films and video content from people who would never be able to do that. And I'm holding on to that because I think we're going to see that happen.
I agree. One takeaway that I got from a previous interview, I spoke to Risa Sexo-Safai, who's another filmmaker. Jagger, you know him. He was on the same competition. And one thing he brought up that I was like, blew my mind is how AI could be used to go over censorship, for example, in a country like Iran, and tell stories that no one would be able to tell because literally you get hanged, right? So that's a use of AI.
With Reza, just to say that this is huge, I think what Reza was saying is like, you can have an AI actor in a film that makes it so that actor doesn't have to get persecuted or arrested for something they did on screen, which is the same thing for the use of AI spokespeople, whether it's publicists or representing a company or a country even. Like I see the possibility for disinformation there, but I also see someone has been protected, right? That's a role where you're in a public facing position where you're talking to the world, like especially as a woman, you're at threat to be, like your family getting doxxed, being personally attacked. So an AI avatar can actually be a sort of a shield from that, and I think that's huge.
Mm-hmm. And Kate, I want to discuss the last guest with you. We're almost wrapping, so I appreciate you all staying a little bit over our initial 30 minutes. We're a minute 50, but truly I could speak to you all for hours, but let's try to wrap it in 5. So thank you also to the people connecting because it's a Friday. I appreciate everybody showing up here. But Kate, one thing that for me was really smart from whoever took that decision in production or Oprah or whatever, which was bringing Marilynne Robinson at the end, to kind of like wrap up, bring in a dose of humanity. And she mentioned something, being in love with our existence, right? Which to me, it filled my heart. So let's focus on the human side of AI, right? And talk a little bit about this last takeaway of what's the human side? What can this new technology help us beyond what we've discussed, right? Like what can help us show our humanity even more? Because AI is here to stay. We know it. So what's next?
Yeah. I mean, again, there's so much to unpack there. But in just a few minutes, the thing that I was thinking about when she said that was a slide that I saw at the Brand X conference in New York earlier this year. And it was 2 slides. It's 2 pictures side by side. We thought we were building this, and it was like an evil robot from outer space. But actually, we built this, and it was the characters from Inside Out sitting inside of your brain, if anyone's familiar with that Pixar movie. We built something in the image of ourselves by creating large language models. And you can tell because they have the same pitfalls as we do. They fib, and they are people pleasers. And if you ask them really nicely, they do a better job. If you incentivize them with money, they do an even better job, right? And, you don't actually pay them, but you tell them you're going to give them money and they do. And so I think what what I wished she was going to say, she didn't quite get there, was that there's actually a certain beauty to the fact that we are so human that we built this magical, amazing robot as a human to replicate a human being at its foundation. But I firmly believe that people will always be people. And human interactions will always be human interactions. And our society is going to gain a new layer with the ability to have those interactions synthetically. But if you really look across the landscape, at least I'd say in the country that I live in, I imagine it's similar around the world. There's a crisis of loneliness. There is an education gap, which Kyle spoke about, where people want to talk, and we have somehow been pulled apart from one another. And I think partially this screen has pulled us apart from one another, and that there's this sort of synthetic world that's coming in that's going to fill in some of those gaps. My true hope is that it fills in those gaps so that we can come closer together, and that the working world does truly follow that utopia that Bill Gates gave us of fewer working hours. Now listen, I'm guilty of it, because we talk about efficiency gains by using AI. And I originally wrote at the beginning of my AI journey that I would use those extra 5 hours of work to hang out with my kids. And sometimes I achieve that, and sometimes I do more work. And sometimes I'm sure companies give you more work when they see how efficient you are being, instead of giving you time off to be with your friends and families. Yeah. So we're in this sort of mix, but I choose to be optimistic. I choose to believe in human beings' power to persist. And I choose to believe that our humanity is pretty much intact and not going anywhere. And if I didn't believe that, I don't know if I'd be able to sleep at night.
Yeah. It also, her segment made me reflect on like the demands I put on myself, and having to remind myself that I'm not AI, and like, because the output that I've started to expect of myself surpasses like realistic human capability. So, yeah, and I think she also spoke about Marilynne spoke about the sort of like difficulty is the point, right? The human struggle of like, hey, but like, wow, I'm trying to get good at something. I'm not good at it. That's humbling. That's challenging. It's building my character. And that's why I believe, and she touched on it, is this sort of like self-betterment and competition that we see in athletes. I think the next like 10 years, especially as it relates to entertainment, media, human capabilities, the Olympics, what are people doing with their hands? What are people building? I think if if I was a VC investor, I would be investing in sports right now, because I think that we are impressed. We are very impressed by what the tech is doing, but we love to impress each other more than anything. So I think we're looking at a very rich next 10 or 20 years of like, wow, what are people doing?
Mm-hmm. And one of the takeaways I usually get when I've been doing this podcast for a while now, believe it or not, time flies, and I've been lucky enough that I got to talk to a lot of people, including y'all. And one of the things that I keep hearing on every episode is, you want to get good at AI, learn your craft. FAI, learn about storytelling, learn about people management, because that's going to make the differential, right? When we have this baseline going up, the 3-second, 10-second videos we're seeing now that it's like, oh, look how cool, they will only get you so far, right? In 6 months, we're going to get used to this, and we'll be as, yeah, you made something with Canva, you can use Paintbrush, good for you, man. But I agree, and personally, it made me happy. This difficulty is the point, because at the end of the day, when we're creating, when we're learning about something, there's nothing more rewarding. I mean, I remember learning to play guitar. The first time that I could kind of like sort of play a song was the best day ever, and I still keep that sense of wonder on everything I do, where like I'm just happy talking to you, and ChatGPT is not going to do that for me. It's this human connection. And there's a book actually called Team Human that I read. Can't remember the author, but I definitely recommend you all Google it, in which it talks about finding the others, finding the humans. And I do think there's there's a need for connection that AI won't be able to replace because we're social animals. We are rebels. We don't like being told what to do. We think we do, but eventually someone goes a little bit too far and we revolt. Kate, you've heard this many times. It's like I'm like a broken record with this one. So it does make me hopeful about this connection. But Kyle, I want to hear from you, and then we'll do some last thoughts and we can all go have lunch.
Yeah. I might have had a slightly different takeaway, but I'm curious to hear everyone's thoughts on this as well, because I loved that quote. We're not in love with ourselves enough as humans, humanity. But I also think a lot about how AI is going to be leveraged to accelerate potentially human evolution, right? I know it's kind of scary to think about, like us as we are today, Homo sapiens, becoming potentially obsolete. But with this technology and its ability to potentially analyze massive numbers of data sets and create new ways of creating medicines or enhancing, just the genes of individual people, I can't help but wonder, does the definition of what it means to be human change with the advent of AI? Even when you think about ChatGPT, which we might all have on our cell phones, we might use the app from time to time. Sometimes I hit that speaker button, I talk to my ChatGPT, ask it questions, and it comes back sounding like a friend, a very knowledgeable friend about certain topics that I might not know otherwise. And it's sort of shocking to hear how human it sounds despite it being totally machine based. What happens when you input that same capability inside of a humanoid robot? Or what happens when you input that same capability or infuse it into the human brain, right? Like, I don't really know where this technology is going to head. There's a lot of science fiction in my responses right now, but it's interesting to think about and definitely something to consider.
Kate, what are your final thoughts? If you had to sum up this conversation or after all this interchange of ideas, what's your takeaway if you had to pick one?
I kind of have to go back to what Jagger started with because it's something that resonated with me, and I don't think we touched on it again, but it was the voices of the real people that were in that special. And just going back to the beginning of this conversation, I think that it's a good thing that people are paying attention, are learning, are experimenting and playing with the technology. I think it's important that it becomes something that is not off in a corner or not something imbued with fear, but something imbued with a sense of hope and a sense of progress. And I think that the minute that more people get their hands on the technology, that will change the trajectory of where this is all going. Just as much as a Sam Altman or, a Bill Gates and his cohorts would do. And so for me, that's really powerful. And it, hands the power back to the many as opposed to the few.
Jagger, what about you?
I think today, after watching the special and chatting with you all, what I'm left is that need for incentives. We need incentives for businesses to produce ethical AI, and we need incentives for the average person to willingly educate themselves on AI. And it's not something I have a solution for today, but that's what I'm left with, that we really need to make this a priority and something that people and businesses will benefit from doing it ethically.
Kyle, how about your thoughts?
I agree with both Kate and Jagger. That I'm an optimist at heart, so I really love the technology and I see the positives, the utopian future that AI could potentially usher in with the ingenuity and collaboration between like minds trying to all work towards a common goal. And that power being accelerated, right? Like, I think that's fantastic. But we've also talked about, of course, the potential opposite impacts that may happen as well. There's great potential for harm. This is a pivotal moment, and I think it's really important that we all get this right. I know that there's tons of us, everyone in this room included, committed to educating others in our own spaces, in our own fields about all the positive benefits that could happen as well as the risks. As long as we continue to do that, hopefully we get to a point where that utopia is a reality.
And I'll piggyback on that, Kyle, because one of the things about AI, and sometimes I know the four of us are very passionate about this technology. And one of the things I like about you all is that also when I speak to you, I don't hear a PR pitch. I hear a human. We might agree on some things, disagree on others, but I know your intentions and I know you're very passionate about this and you know that you want to make a positive difference, right? So I think one of the things, especially as we think about how normal people are perceiving AI and the influence, it's our role at educating people, empowering them, because also, and I make this my personal pet peeve, there are so many grifters out there, so many people using AI to sell fear, to sell give me your money, or because you're inadequate, you are useless now unless you pay for my dumb course. So again, I'm talking about people that to me are not helping, but they'll always be here. They'll be here once we go into the AGI. They'll find a way to be grifters with that as well. So I think the role of educating, and for creatives, it's very important to learn these tools. Know your enemy. You hate it, that's fine, but learn how to use a tool. Learn what's your differential. Learn how you can add value, because there's a lot of value. I think AI reinforces all the things that humanity brings to the table, and it's an opportunity for us to reconnect with each other. Again, it's a double-edged sword. It either is going to get us to reconnect with each other, love each other, and be in love with being human, or we all end up killing each other. It's not going to be the robots. It's going to be 100% us, right? And greed and capitalism, and don't get me started. So
ending on a beautiful note, Juan.
I'm an optimist, man. I just love people. Any final thoughts before we wave goodbye?
Thank you all so much. I loved having this conversation. This has been so great. And thank you, Oprah, for talking about it with the world.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Thank you all so much.
Yeah.
Likewise.
So, folks, let's do a quick one. Where can people learn more about you and the work you're doing? Let's start with you, Kate.
www.era7partners.com or follow me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Jagger?
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn or jaggerwaters.substack.com.
Kyle?
Feel free to connect with me on my LinkedIn. Just search for my name. Happy to have a conversation with anyone.
And if you're watching this episode, like the recording, which will be available shortly in YouTube and everywhere where we can post video for more than 10 minutes, you can find this on YouTube at Juan Faisal. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to chat to everyone. But thank you all for connecting today. It's been an amazing experience. First time doing a live stream, so I was a little bit nervous about how it was going to come out. But you folks made it all easy because you're so smart and talented and you have such a clear way of communicating that it's been truly an honor talking to the three of you. And I hope we do this again. Yes. Maybe, when society collapses, we'll do a live show.
Let's hope the opposite.
Yeah. Let's hope I just like being, clickbaity. So anyway, thank you all. Have an amazing Friday. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.